Hi all. My name is Julia Gorham, and this is my presentation entitled Evaluating Critical Literacies and Symbolic Competence in L2 Multimodal Compositions. And I am super excited to present this, albeit virtually, with all y'all here for the L2 Digital Literacy Symposium. And I'm also really excited to connect with everyone in asynchronous chat and to watch everyone else's incredible, I'm sure, presentations. This scholarly type of exchange has really, I've missed it. So I'm excited. And without further ado, I'm going to give you a brief overview of where I'm going to go with this presentation today, both where I'm starting and where I hope we'll end up. So first of all, I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction to symbolic competence and critical literacies. These are the two main theoretical concepts, the main frameworks that this study is based on. And so I'm going to give a little bit of a brief overview of the main theory on each of them. I'm also going to show how they begin to connect and how they're similar and different. Then I will give you a brief overview of the theory, the background, and the existing literature in regards to both symbolic competence and critical literacies. I will then move on to the research questions and the purpose of the present study before discussing methodologies, and then theoretical and practical findings, and giving you a conclusion. As you can kind of see from this overview, and as will become more clear in just a minute when I go over the kind of the scope of this study a little more with you, is that it is both theoretical and empirical, theoretical and research based. It has both aspects to it. Okay, so I think just given the fact that this presentation is about symbolic competence and critical literacies, and that the occasion here is the L2DL conference, I thought that kind of an apt way to give an introduction here would be to start with some images that I think really represent and explain the concepts of critical literacy, symbolic competence, and their relationship to second language learning. So first, in the first image here on the top left, critical literacy is a new literacy that fits into the school of thought of new literacy studies, as that was pioneered by G and colleagues in 2010, and also by Kastek and colleagues in 2013. It's a new literacy. It fits into this realm of literacy studies, where we are calling into question this idea of literacy just being the ability to read and write, and we're starting to say actually literacy is much more than that, and it includes this global concept of literacy, includes lots of smaller literacies, such as digital literacy, right, such as media literacy, such as critical literacy, etc., etc., etc. So I'm going to go into critical literacy in just a minute, but I just wanted to situate that in the theoretical framework for everyone here. And so now I want to quickly move over to this image on the right, this cartoon. And if you speak French, you'll immediately be able to figure out what's going on here. If you don't, I will explain it. So we have this first jolly fellow on the left who says, "Appelez-moi Maurice. Call me Maurice." So they're introducing each other, and he says, "Call me Maurice." And our fellow on the right here, he says, "Appelez-moi Monsieur Edouard. Call me Mr. Edward." Okay, so Monsieur is this title that we put in front of someone's name, right? So it's kind of interesting that our dude number one, he says, "Oh, you can just call me Maurice." But dude number two insists on being called Monsieur Edward, right? So there's something you can see just by this exchange that Monsieur Edward, he's exerting a little bit of power, right, over Maurice, because he's insisting on having this title in front of his name. right? And it's funny. I mean, they look to be buddy-buddy here, right? They've got their arms around each other. He's smoking, I don't even know what that is, a cigar. Who knows what that is? But in any case, sorry, it's 2020. What can I say? But in any case, he's exerting a little bit of symbolic power over Maurice. And this is exactly what symbolic competence is. It's this ability to detect this power hierarchy and these subversions in text, any type of text, written text, multimodal text, digital text, and in interactions in general. It's this ability to detect these little subtle lines of power and hierarchy. And I'm going to go into more of that in just a minute as well. And then all of these are related. Critical literacy and symbolic competence are both together related to second language learning, because in order to learn and use a second language in context, you need to be able to look at things critically and to understand the power hierarchies that are going on in any type of communication. All right, so a little bit of literature and theory. I'll start with symbolic competence because that tends to sometimes be the one that people are less familiar with. Sometimes people are really familiar with the new literacies train of thought, but haven't really heard of symbolic competence. So it's a concept that's almost exclusively pioneered by Claire Crampsch over at Berkeley, starting in the early 2000s up to the present. She defines symbolic competence as the ability to express, interpret, and negotiate meanings in dialogue with others, and the ability to produce and exchange symbolic goods, meaning emotions, experiences, identities, affiliations, histories, morals, and values in the complex global context in which we live today. So this idea of symbolic competence, it really focuses on power, hierarchy, and subversion. And it proposes as central the circulation of values and identities across cultures, the inversions, even inventions of meaning, often hidden behind a common illusion of effective communication. So as you can kind of start to see here, symbolic competence is more than the definitions of competence that have preceded it. It's more than communicative competence, right? It goes above the ability to just communicate effectively and to express ideas. It even goes a little bit beyond intercultural competence, because it does say that we have to be able to express meaning, right, and to navigate among diverse individuals, among cultures, but it has this extra added emphasis on power and hierarchy and recognizing this and using it. Okay, so that's kind of how symbolic competence modifies a little bit the idea of competence as we know it already in the field of second language teaching and learning. So that was a lot of theory. And it can sometimes be hard to conceptualize in practice, but Crampsch breaks symbolic competence down into three main capacities that she says make up symbolic competence. The first is production of complexity. So the ability to look at any type of text or interaction and to challenge it, to pose questions, to complicate it, rather than trying to just simplify and understand it as it is. Number two, the tolerance of ambiguity. So the fact of being okay that things are unclear and that there might be contradictions, and not necessarily looking to, to resolve those immediately because we're uncomfortable with them. And third, analysis of form. So analysis in almost any type. Critical analysis, multimodal analysis, all of that. And as you can see, this construct fits really, really nicely into a multi-literacies view, a multi-literacies curriculum. That's based on this complexity and this analysis as well. Okay, so I just talked about symbolic competence. I'm going to move on to critical literacies very quickly here. So just to give you, as I said, it's situated in the framework of new literacies. And I'm just going to read you this citation here. I think it's said very well, and I can't say it better, so I'm just going to read this citation. Critical literacy practices encourage students to question power structures and societal injustices in order to take action for change. Students are taught to use text to construct meaning by questioning the practices of the systems in which texts are embedded. And then Van Sluys and colleagues postulate that there are 4 dimensions of critical literacies. 4 components. The first being disrupting the commonplace, which again, not settling for common understanding, taking something that's considered a common understanding and complicating it, questioning it, digging into the arguments to break it down. Number 2, interrogating multiple points of view. Number 3, focusing on socio-political issues. And number 4, taking action. Okay, and I'm going to break down those 4 dimensions in more detail here in a minute. But before I do that, I know this might seem like a little abrupt change, but I think it's going to work. We'll see. I want to go into my research questions and the purpose of this present study. So the present study aims to fill the gap of practical research concerning symbolic competence in the second language classroom, as well as its connections to critical literacies, by answering the following questions. Number 1, what theoretical connections exist between the concepts of symbolic competence and critical literacies? And number 2, how are symbolic competence and critical literacies manifest in students' L2 multimodal compositions? So as I said in the beginning of this presentation is both theoretical and empirical simultaneously, the first question being more theoretical and the second being more based on data. Okay. All right. So in order to address, I'm going to address the theoretical research question first. This question number 1. What theoretical connections exist between the concepts of symbolic competence and critical literacies? And I'm just going to kind of do this in dialogue with all y'all, if that's okay. I know it's a little weird. We're asynchronous and everything, but I'm imagining that I'm engaging in a dialogue with all y'all right now. So I hope you're imagining the same thing. So to kind of compare and contrast and interrogate the concepts of critical literacies and symbolic competence that we just discussed. So we have the 4 dimensions of critical literacies here on the left, according to Sluys and colleagues, and here on the right, the 3 components of symbolic competence as proposed by Cramsch. And so if you look at these, here on the left, number 1, disrupting the commonplace. We said that was, taking a common understanding, something that's just kind of taken for granted and questioning it, calling it into question. To me, this is almost another way of reformulating the idea implied by producing complexity. Yeah, so by disrupting the commonplace, we are inherently producing complexity, meaning that by performing dimension 1 of critical literacies, we are also performing dimension 1 of symbolic competence. Coming back to critical literacies, number 2, interrogating multiple points of view. So interrogating multiple points of view, that is going to contribute to complexity, right? The more points of view that we take into account, the more complex things get, instead of just, saying, oh, well, this is my point of view and I'm just going to go with that one. No, that's what we're trying to get away from. Yeah. So by doing dimension 2 of critical literacies, we're also doing producing complexity in symbolic competence. And I would argue that we are also doing number 2 of symbolic competence. We are also tolerating ambiguity, because there's always going to be a certain degree of ambiguity, of unknown. That's just inherent whenever we question the commonplace and whenever we have multiple points of view. That's just how it is. There's going to be a certain level of ambiguity. So I would argue that numbers 1 and 2 of critical literacies necessitate 1 and 2 of symbolic competence. Yeah? And then number 3, critical literacies, focusing on socio-political issues. This is certainly oh my gosh, the word consistent. This is certainly consistent with what we're aiming to do in symbolic competence as well. The difference here, in my opinion, is these last steps, analyzing form and taking action. So symbolic competence says that we have to analyze form, right? And a form of the text, of any type of text, the multimodal text, a written text, an interaction, any type of text. And analysis can be any type of analysis. The one that comes to mind right now is a multimodal analysis, but it's not limited to that. Whereas critical literacies says taking action. So in critical literacies, we don't stop with just interrogating these sociopolitical issues and questioning them. We actually have to take action. We have to do something. We have to become activists in order to change that. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, okay, in my opinion, in a minute when I talk about the practical side of this study. But I'm just going to postulate right now that this taking action, this can become the form of a multimodal product. So to summarize what I just said, and again, I know that there's people that are not going to like the combination of these two theoretical constructs, and that's okay. You're more than welcome to disagree with me. I'm just trying to do some, reconciling here between the new literacies perspective and this other more competence-based perspective that I think is actually very interesting. So taking action, again, it makes students activists. The opposite is slacktivism, where we just recognize that there is an issue, but we don't do anything concrete about it. I was going to be all digitally literate with all y'all and type as I talked, but I forgot. So let's just get that. Okay. So now I would like to get into a little bit of the practical side of this study and to talk about what data was collected and how it was analyzed. So this study is based on data collected when a multi-literacies and project-based curriculum was developed and taught in fourth semester French classes at a large university in the American Southwest. The data collected focuses on 2 classes during the spring 2020 semester and 1 class during the summer 2020 semester. And this data, it's important to note, is part of a longitudinal study that was much bigger than that, and that is still going. Okay, so we're just going to see a snippet of this data, and this data has been used and collected for other projects as well. But this is what we're focusing on. The data items collected include, first, a hyperlink annotated poem project, second, a multimodal debate project, and third, a multimodal campaign project. So these 2 multimodal projects were very similar. Students created any type, they had a lot of liberty, any type of final product they wanted. They ranged from brochures to podcasts to short films to interviews, all of that. And for the debate project, they were trying to argue either for or against the Law 101 in Quebec, which essentially makes French the official language of business and education in that province. And for the campaign project, they were trying to campaign for an imaginary presidential candidate of their choice. And so the data was subjected to mixed methods analysis, including 3 rounds of qualitative coding, open, axial, and selective, with thematic treatment. Calculation of basic statistics was also done. But these findings are very preliminary because, as I said, the study was longitudinal. Analysis is still underway. So I'm just going to present a little bit of it to you, kind of some examples, and initiate some dialogue. That's my objective here. So the student sample was very diverse. There's 29 students that completed this part of the study. As I said, this was a larger study, and there were much more consenting students in other parts. But for this particular part, there's 29 consenting students. They have a wide age range, wide range of years in school, lots of different majors and minors, and lots of different backgrounds. It's a very diverse and representative sample. So what I want to do now is to just look at some examples, two examples of multimodal student projects, and try to break them down for you according to this framework of critical literacies and symbolic competence that I started out with. And I'm going to go quickly because I'm running out of time, as usual, but that's okay. So this first example, this is a multimodal campaign brochure made by Michael in summer 2020. This is his brochure, and this is just the cover page. There were 6 other pages here. I don't have time to look at all 6 pages with you, but Michael did consent for this to be shared, and so I might see if there's a way I can put this link so that you guys can look at the rest of it, like in the comments or something. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but once L2DL is actually going, I'll see if there's a way I can put that in there. And of course, today's October 4th. Yeah, I'm recording this 2 weeks late. It's 2020. No one cares. Okay, moving on. But I'll see if there's a way I can put this in the links. Okay, so this brochure was made by Michael. And first of all, it's very impressive just visually. This is Emmanuel Macron, who is the current French president. And in this brochure, Michael is envisioning a theoretical second campaign between Macron and Le Pen. So the last time that Macron ran for president, his adversary was the very right-wing Marine Le Pen. And Michael is imagining a next election in which it's the same 2 candidates. And whether that's realistic or not is it's not necessarily relevant. What is relevant is that he is repainting this election of Macron and Le Pen in terms of current events. And I'm going to talk about that a little more. And so what I want to do, so if we see here, we have this, he titled it Les Libéraux, Politique, Enjeux, Questions, Politics, Stakes, Questions. He gave it a date and a prize. So the format of this is exactly like the little brochures you get, in the little, I don't know what they're called in English, but the little stands on the side of the street in France where they sell these things, or like at the entry to the metro or things like that. It looks exactly like that. And then he has this little comment, autre, the results of Trump's IQ test. Okay, which is rather funny. So, without making a political comment, what I want to do is to talk about how Michael's campaign brochure does numbers 1, 2, and 3, and 4 of critical literacies. So, disrupting the commonplace, he certainly does that. Because Macron is the current president, right, in France, the current president, and in this brochure, he goes on to disrupt that, to question and break apart his politics without making a political statement per se, but to question it and to call it into consideration. And also, this fact of having a second election between Macron and Le Pen is also obviously disrupting the commonplace. Interrogating multiple points of view, he's clearly doing, because he's going to talk about these 2 candidates and different people's perspectives on these. Focusing on socio-political issues, that's clear, it's a given. In addition to this little remark about Trump here at the bottom, and then taking action, which he clearly does in the form of this brochure itself. So in this case, this final multimodal product is the action. And Michael actually was really passionate about this project. And he contacted me after he finished it and said that he wanted to distribute it. He wanted to distribute this brochure. And so we kind of had the discussion, him and I, as to, well, what is the best audience for this brochure? And decided that here in the US, it would really be limited to other students of French. And he really wanted a broader audience. So I am actually working right now with some of my friends that I know and other people who are teaching who are teaching students in France about second language teaching, so French students who want to become second language teachers. And we're trying to get these distributed to applied linguistics classes in Paris-Sorbonne, among others, which would be really awesome. So yeah, he did take action, and I think this is an emblematic example of that. And then I really wanted to discuss this video with you too, because this is a really good example of all four of those constructs. To go back here, we said that numbers 1, 2, and 3, right? If he's doing these of critical literacies, those are necessitating symbolic competence, right? And then he's just adding on to that by actually taking action. And so this is a video that takes action as well. I'm not sure I have time, unfortunately, to discuss it, but I'm going to also see if I can't put that in the comments, okay? And so now I'm going to do my conclusion really quickly just because of time. But I think what this data shows us is the similarities, differences, and the importance of symbolic competence and critical literacies, why it's important to draw parallels between these two constructs that kind of come from different fields, because I think by bringing supporters of the new literacies type of movement and, more competence-based approaches together, we can really élargir the scope of people that are going to be using critical literacies and symbolic competence-based approaches in their classrooms, and I think that is just excellent, both practically and for research. And then, to my knowledge, the other part of this study that you didn't see, but as I said, this was used for multiple purposes, was, to my knowledge, one of the first attempts to operationalize and code symbolic competence. Obviously, both SC and CL have enormous implications to classroom implementation with multiliteracies and multimodality, and it shows that relatively low-level students can and do develop symbolic competence and critical literacies. So with that, I'm going to stop. I think I've overexceeded my time at this point. I'm really looking forward to engaging with all y'all in the asynchronous discussion. I'll leave a comment. I'll get back to you. I hope to watch your guys' presentations as well. Again, this is I'm too excited about this. Just scholarly exchange like this has really been something that I've missed in the past couple of months. So thank you guys so much, and have a good day. Bye.